I didn't know you could feel your life split in two without anyone touching you. 1 second, you're certain of where you belong. The next, you're standing in the rain, your own house just a few feet away, locked from the inside. It was late. I'd driven 2 hours straight from my brother's place, contractions coming every 8, maybe 7 minutes. I wanted to tell my wife, Andrea, in person, that it was time, that our son was on his way. I wanted us to start this together. The porch light was on when I pulled in. Through the living room window, I could see her shape on the couch, and next to her, Nate, my best friend since high school. My gut tightened, but I told myself I was just tired. They'd help me get to the hospital. I stepped onto the porch, water running down the back of my neck. My fingers closed around my keys. The first twist didn't work, neither did the second. I pulled the key out, stared at it, and tried again. The lock was new. I knocked, careful at first, then harder. "Andrea, it's me. We have to go." She looked up from the couch but didn't move. Nate didn't even glance my way. Another contraction bent me forward. I held onto the doorframe and knocked again, louder. "Please, we don't have time for this." Andrea stood, walked toward the window, and stopped just behind the curtain. Her voice carried through the narrow gap. "You made your choice when you walked out on this family." "What are you talking about? I just drove here." "You'll figure it out," she said flatly. Then she stepped back. I pounded the door. "Andrea, I'm in labor." The only sound in response was the click of the deadbolt sliding shut. For a few seconds, I just stood there, my breath fogging in the cold air. Inside, shadows shifted, the kind of movements people make when they're comfortable, and I was on the wrong side of the wall. My phone was slick in my hand. I called her twice, both went to voicemail. On the third attempt, a message said the number wasn't accepting calls. Through the curtain's edge, I caught the flicker of movement. Nate was smiling at something she'd said. My stomach turned in a way that had nothing to do with the contractions. I backed off the porch, shoes splashing in a shallow puddle. The rain blurred everything into streaks of light. My car sat waiting at the curb like the only safe place left in the world. My brother answered on the first ring. "What's wrong?" "They changed the locks," I said, my voice shaking. "They won't let me in." He didn't ask why. "Get in the car. I'll meet you at the diner on 5th. Don't drive too far if the contractions get closer." I slid into the driver's seat, the wipers barely keeping up with the downpour. I couldn't stop seeing their silhouettes in that window, not looking for me, not helping, just waiting for me to disappear. By the time I reached the diner, the contractions were 5 minutes apart. My brother was already outside, phone in hand, giving an address to the 911 operator. When I stepped out of the car, another contraction hit hard enough to steal my breath. The paramedics arrived fast. Inside the ambulance, the air was warm and full of quiet urgency. Minutes later, my son's first cry filled the space. I held him against my chest, memorizing the weight of him, the heat of his skin. And even in that moment, the one I'd imagined for months, the thought burned in the back of my mind. They'd locked me out, knowing exactly what they were doing. I wasn't going to forget it. I didn't sleep much after the hospital. My son was healthy, and that was the only thing keeping me from boiling over. But the silence from Andrea told me everything. She wasn't sorry, and she wasn't afraid. 2 days later, my brother dropped by with coffee. He set a small tablet on the table. "You left this in my car." It wasn't mine. Andrea's, maybe. The lock screen was off. I told myself not to open it, but my thumb was already moving. Messages lit up the screen, her and Nate, months of them. They weren't just talking about me, they were planning. A week before that night, she'd written, "Make sure the locksmith comes before he gets back." Nate's reply, "Already handled." I scrolled faster. A recorded clip appeared. I tapped it. Andrea's voice sharp and cold. "Don't let him in. He needs to learn his place." My chest tightened, but I kept going. Screenshots of bank transfers, money I'd saved for the baby's college fund, sent to Nate's account, then withdrawn in cash. I didn't slam the tablet shut. I didn't call her. I called a lawyer. Her name was Rachel. She listened without interrupting, then said, "First thing, make copies of everything, every message, every transfer. Don't warn them. We'll move when we have it all." That night, I uploaded everything to an encrypted folder she sent. Screenshots, audio files, bank records. The more I saved, the more the weight shifted off my chest and into my hands. 3 days later, we were parked down the street from my own house. My brother stayed in the car with the baby. Rachel stood next to me with a man carrying a toolbox. The locksmith didn't waste time. As soon as he started drilling, the front door cracked open. Andrea appeared, eyes wide. "What do you think you're doing?" I didn't raise my voice. "Changing the locks, just like you did to me." "This is my house," she snapped. Rachel stepped forward. "It's marital property, and under state law, your husband has the right to secure it if his access was unlawfully denied, which it was." Nate came into view behind her. He started to speak, but I cut him off. "Save it. You were part of this. I have proof." Andrea's face shifted. "You can't just—" "I can, and I did." The locksmith handed me the new keys. They stood in the doorway as we walked back to the car. Neither followed. They hadn't expected me to fight back. That night, Andrea tried calling. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short. "We need to talk." There was nothing left to talk about. Rachel moved fast. She filed for emergency custody, froze the joint accounts, and put a hold on all shared credit lines. By the next morning, Andrea's grocery card declined, and Nate's hotel bill bounced. A neighbor texted me a video from the store. Andrea arguing with the cashier, demanding they fix the mistake. I watched it once, then deleted it. It wasn't about humiliating her in public. It was about taking back what she'd tried to steal. My home, my son's future, my dignity. When Rachel called with a court date, I was ready. "We'll go slow," she said, "piece by piece. Let them feel it." I thought about that night in the rain, knocking on my own door while they sat inside. I thought about my son's first cry in the back of an ambulance. They'd wanted me out of my own life. Now I was making sure they couldn't get back in. The courthouse smelled like coffee and paper, and that was all I needed to keep my head clear. Rachel met me outside the courtroom and laid out the order of attack. Finances first, access denial second, then custody. When the clerk called our case, Andrea was already at the respondents' table with Nate 2 seats behind her. He avoided my eyes. "Good, let him." Rachel opened with the bank trail. We submitted the statements, transfers from our joint account to a checking account in Nate's name, then withdrawals in cash. Dates, amounts, memo lines. No commentary, just facts. The judge read each page as if it were a checklist. Rachel called a forensic accountant we'd retained. He didn't dress it up. He pointed to the screen and traced the path of the money. He noted the dates matched nights I was on overtime shifts or traveling for work. He identified a recurring payment to a private storage unit I didn't know about. The judge asked 2 questions. Both answers were short and damning. Next came the messages. Rachel moved to admit the screenshots and the audio clip. Andrea's attorney objected on privacy, then on relevance. Both overruled. The audio played through the courtroom speakers. Andrea's voice even and clear. "Don't let him in. He needs to learn his place." There was no reaction from her table. Nate kept still. Rachel didn't look at them. She asked me to explain how I obtained the files. I told the judge the tablet had been in our home, not password protected, and that the account credentials were shared. No drama, just the steps. The judge nodded and marked the exhibit. We shifted to the lockout. I testified about the night, the new hardware, the unanswered calls, the deadbolt sliding shut while I was timing contractions. I did not raise my voice. Rachel showed the locksmith's receipt scheduled the day before. She showed the call log with my attempts and the automated block message. She pulled up the ambulance report listing the diner lot as the delivery site. The judge asked if I had confronted Andrea after. I told him I chose counsel first. He wrote something on a form and set his pen down. Andrea's attorney finally stood to cross. He said the transfers were shared spending, that the messages were taken out of context, that the lock change was for security. He tried to suggest I had anger issues. Rachel objected, and the judge sustained it. The attorney backed off and called Nate to testify. Nate repeated the word misunderstanding until it stopped sounding like English. He said he thought the account was a gift, that the locksmith was for a faulty latch, that he believed I'd moved out. Rachel asked one thing. On the night my client's child was born, did you open the door when he knocked? He hesitated. No. Why? Andrea asked me not to. That was enough. Andrea took the stand. She said she felt unsafe because of arguments. She offered no police reports, no messages supporting the claim. Rachel kept her questions narrow. Did you authorize the lock change? Yes. Did you block your husband's number? Yes. Did you know he was on his way home that night? He said he might be. Did you know he was in labor? He said he was having contractions. The judge asked her to repeat that last part. She did, quieter this time. Rachel rested. We waited. The judge reviewed the exhibits again. He spoke without raising his voice. On the evidence before me, I find a deliberate denial of access to marital property and interference with a spouse's ability to seek medical care. He paused. I also find misappropriation of shared funds without consent, documented through financial records and corroborated by communications. He granted me temporary full legal and physical custody, with supervised visitation for Andrea at a community site. He ordered a freeze on all joint accounts until a final distribution. He barred Andrea and Nate from the residence pending a safety review. He scheduled a hearing on sanctions related to the asset transfers. And then he did one thing I didn't expect. He referred the financial matter to the county for potential criminal review. Andrea's attorney objected. The judge overruled him and signed the order. The gavel didn't slam. He just said we were adjourned. Outside the courtroom, Andrea's attorney tried to position a settlement talk. Rachel said we'd discuss after compliance with the orders. We walked past Nate in the hall. He stared at the floor. My brother texted that he and the baby were around the corner. I told him I'd be there in 5 minutes. At home, the locks I'd installed 2 weeks earlier were still tight. I checked each window latch, then sat at the kitchen table with Rachel's checklist. Freeze confirmations, visitation schedule, home inspection date. She left me with a script for any contact attempts, all communication through counsel. Simple enough. The fallout started the next day. HR requested a meeting with Nate. I wasn't there, but I knew their policy. No relationships with spouses of current employees, no use of company time for non-work activities, no misuse of confidential information. By afternoon, he was escorted out. No spectacle, just policy. Andrea called from a restricted number, left one voicemail. We can fix this if you stop. I saved it to the folder and didn't respond. She texted from another number that I was ruining our son's family. I forwarded it to Rachel, who replied with one line, "Do not answer." The county investigator emailed to schedule an interview. I sent him the encrypted link and the inventory list. He thanked me for the organization. Rachel said he'd probably subpoena bank footage for withdrawals and storage records for the unit. Process, not drama. A neighbor sent me a photo of a moving truck outside Andrea's sister's place. I didn't share it with anyone. It wasn't useful. What mattered was compliance with the order and my son's schedule. That weekend, during supervised visitation, Andrea tried to apologize in fragments that avoided the point. I kept it to logistics, feeding times, nap windows, medication instructions. The coordinator took notes. When the hour ended, I packed the diaper bag and left without looking back. On Monday, Rachel filed our final petition: dissolution, primary residence awarded to me, restitution for the siphoned funds, and a no harassment clause. She added a line item for attorney's fees based on Andrea's bad faith actions. The filings were clean and specific. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aligned. The door they'd closed on me wasn't the last word. The last word was the one I chose in court, on paper, and in routine that kept my son fed and sleeping. People think revenge is loud. It isn't. It's a series of precise steps that return what was taken and put the rest out of reach. We weren't done, not yet. But the center of gravity had already shifted, and this time it wasn't moving back. The knock came before sunrise, a subpoena taped to my door, and an email from the county investigator asking for a follow-up interview. The referral from the judge hadn't stalled. It had turned into a case file. At the station, the investigator spread out a timeline. He'd matched ATM footage with the bank withdrawals we'd flagged, pulled the storage unit logs, and traced a prepaid phone used to move money between accounts. He asked straight questions and didn't push when I kept my answers to facts. When we were done, he slid a copy of my inventory back across the table. "You did half my job. Thank you," Rachel called that afternoon. "They're drafting charges, identity theft for the forged transfer authorizations, unlawful use of a financial instrument, and conspiracy. Nate's name is on 2 of them." 2 days later, Nate broke. His attorney reached out for a proffer. He'd give up everything he knew in exchange for a lenient recommendation. Rachel told me to keep my reactions off my face and out of my messages. I did. The county took his statement. He admitted the lockout plan, the cash pickups, and the storage unit. He handed over his phone. The prosecutor emailed an offer to Andrea. Plead to a single felony, accept restitution and community service, surrender access to joint credit, and agree to a no-contact clause outside parenting logistics. If she refused, they'd add the remaining counts and move to trial. She asked for time. The office gave her a week. On the civil side, we had our settlement conference. Andrea's attorney opened with a complaint about supervised visits. Rachel kept us on the rails. Compliance first, then any adjustment. We went point by point: custody, schedule, house, accounts, fees. Every item tied back to an order or a document, no bargaining on the basics. When Andrea tried to trade custody for money, the mediator shut it down. The plea deadline landed before our next court date. Andrea took the deal. The prosecutor read the elements. She answered guilty to each, voice steady but thin. The judge scheduled sentencing and set conditions: financial monitoring, no new credit, continued compliance with the family orders. Nate's cooperation earned him a misdemeanor and a year of probation with restitution liability. He didn't look at me on the way out. Sentencing for Andrea happened 3 weeks later. The courtroom was half full. The prosecutor cited the pattern: concealed transfers, coordinated lockout, deliberate obstruction on the night of a medical emergency. Rachel submitted our victim impact statement on paper. I kept my remarks to 2 lines. She blocked me from my home the night my son was born, and she used our savings to build a life that didn't include us. The judge didn't linger. 12 months in county with 6 suspended, 3 years probation, full restitution, financial counselling, and a criminal protective order covering harassment and third-party contact. No jail remand that day. Report-in date set for the end of the month. The gavel wasn't loud, but the terms were clear: actions, consequences, distance. We met HR the next morning to close the loop on my side. They'd completed their internal review. My record stayed clean. The compliance team asked if I needed schedule flexibility for visitation windows. I shifted 2 afternoons and signed the form. Routine mattered more than victory laps. With the criminal case resolved, we moved for the final decree. Rachel slid the stack across the conference table and pointed at the last page. The terms were the ones we'd pushed from day one: sole legal and physical custody to me, structured visitation under supervision for 6 months, with a path to monitored transitions if she stayed compliant. The house and its equity awarded to me, A repayment plan for the siphoned funds with wage withholding, no harassment language with an escalating penalty clause. Andrea signed without comment. I signed and stood up, no handshake, no speech. The next weeks were quiet in the way you can measure. Supervised visits happened on time. Andrea kept her voice low, stuck to questions about feeding and naps, handed back the diaper bag with everything intact. Nate moved out of state. My phone stopped lighting up with unknown numbers. The storage unit shut down, the account zeroed, the receipts logged. Neighbors tried to pull me into their version of events. I cut it off politely. It's resolved. That was true. Resolution didn't mean forgetting. It meant the next decision belonged to me, not to the people who locked me out. At home, I built a system. Mornings were bottles and burp cloths, a quick walk, and a standing check-in with Rachel's office. Afternoons were work and a timer for anything legal. Evenings were quiet on purpose. When anxiety hit after bedtime, I opened the folder, made sure every document had a label, and closed it again. Order was a choice I could make. One night, Andrea called from a supervised line to say she'd started the financial counselling the court ordered. I said I'd note it. She asked if there was a chance to move to unsupervised visits sooner. I told her to speak to her attorney and the coordinator. I didn't promise what wasn't mine to grant. The decree arrived by mail a week later, stamped, filed, final. No ceremony. Just a line on paper that ended one life and confirmed another. I scanned it into the folder and put the original in a fireproof box. Then I turned off the kitchen light and went to check on my son. People asked if I felt relief. Not exactly. Relief fades. What stayed was something simpler, a frame around the chaos, a record that didn't depend on memory, a schedule that protected a child who didn't ask for any of this. That was enough. I didn't celebrate. I set my alarm for the morning, packed the bag for the next supervised hour, and sent Rachel a one-line email. Decree received. Thank you. She replied the same way. Well done. Keep going. The door that once shut me out now closed at night on my terms. Not because I won a scene, but because I chose the kind of fight that ends with signatures, not shouting. There was nothing dramatic left to take. There was only the one thing I'd wanted since the ambulance. A clear path for my son and a life that no one else could lock. The decree didn't end the turbulence, it just changed its shape. 2 weeks after it arrived, Andrea filed to modify visitation. She'd finished the financial counselling sessions and wanted unsupervised time. The coordinator's report showed basic compliance, but it also noted 2 late arrivals and 1 missed check-in. Rachel told me to stick to the record, not to opinions. We prepared the response, timelines, sign-in sheets, and the clause she'd agreed to about progressive steps only after consistent performance. At the hearing, Andrea's attorney argued that supervision was punitive. The coordinator spoke first and kept it clinical. Andrea was cooperative but inconsistent. She followed instructions during visits. She needed more time under the current structure. The judge kept the order as is for another 60 days, with a review if she hit every marker. No drama, just a clock. 3 visits later, the clock cracked. I arrived at the community centre and saw Nate in the parking lot, leaning against a car near the entrance. The protective order barred third-party contact through him. I didn't approach. I called the coordinator from my driver's seat and waited. She came outside, saw him, and asked Andrea to proceed without him. Andrea said he was just giving a ride. The coordinator shook her head and cancelled the hour on the spot. Violation of conditions. I buckled my son back into his seat and drove away without a word. That afternoon, Rachel filed a notice of non-compliance with an affidavit from the coordinator attached. The judge reset the supervision clock to 0 days completed and added a warning. 1 more violation would trigger contempt. Andrea's attorney sent a short email asking for clarification. Rachel replied by pasting the paragraph from the order that forbade third-party involvement. Nothing to interpret. 2 days later, HR asked me to stop by. An anonymous report had landed in their portal claiming I was unstable and a threat to a co-worker. HR cross-checked my schedule, reviewed the complaint's details, and found nothing. They closed it. I didn't have to guess who filed it. I also didn't waste time thinking about it. Documentation had become a reflex. I wrote down the meeting time, the outcome, and moved on. Then came the welfare check. 2 officers at my door, polite, responding to a call about a baby crying for hours. I invited them in, showed them the monitor logs and the pediatrician's note about normal sleep patterns, and they left satisfied. Before the door closed, one of them said, "Happens a lot in custody disputes." I emailed Rachel and the coordinator, attached the officer's card, and kept the routine intact. Andrea missed the next visit window. The coordinator called her, no answer. She called me and logged it as a no-show. A day later, Andrea texted from an approved line. She'd been sick. The coordinator asked for a doctor's note per protocol. None came. Another mark on the log. A month passed. Nate moved across state lines permanently, according to a change of address notice that popped up in one of the subpoenaed records we still had access to. Andrea stayed local. She kept her visits quiet and brief, stuck to the script, and avoided asking about anything outside the hour. It was the most sustainable behavior I'd seen from her since this started. The coordinator's notes shifted from reminded to observed. No praise, no judgment, just a record. We approached the 60-day review. Rachel built the packet, visit logs, proof of my compliance, Andrea's mixed record, and the earlier violation. Andrea filed her own packet with certificates from counselling and screenshots of calendars. The judge heard both sides and kept supervision, but added a trial transition. 2 short community-based outings with a monitor nearby if Andrea stayed fully compliant for 4 consecutive weeks. He told us both that deviations would cancel the trial. The first monitored outing was a park walk. Andrea arrived early, brought snacks approved by the coordinator, and stayed within sight. She didn't push for extra time or ask to change the plan. The second outing was similar. The coordinator noted improved reliability, schedules held. My son slept harder after those days, a sign he was getting used to the handoffs and the return. Then Andrea asked for mediation, not about custody, about communication boundaries. I went because lines matter more when both people recognize them. The mediator set ground rules. Andrea apologized without adjectives, not for the first time, but this time she attached actions. She'd stop forwarding articles about parenting styles, keep messages to scheduling, and use the shared app for everything. She said she wanted our son to know a version of us that didn't pull him into a fight. I said I wanted the same thing, and that trust wasn't part of the conversation. Systems were. We signed a parallel parenting addendum, fixed exchange points, a refusal to use family or friends as messengers, and a rule that all schedule changes required 72 hours notice, unless there was an emergency. It wasn't reconciliation, it was a plan. The last loose thread was the storage unit. The prosecutor's office invited me to its closure so I could claim any personal property. The manager rolled up the door. Inside were boxes, old mail, duplicate keys, receipts, and a folder of printed photos from before any of this. I took the documents with my name on them and left the rest. The manager logged the handover. The prosecutor's clerk thanked me for coming and closed the file. On the walk back to my car, my phone buzzed with a new message in the parenting app. Andrea had uploaded the next month's proposed visits, all within the order, all precise. I approved the ones that matched the coordinator's slots and declined the ones that didn't, with the required notation. No commentary. People kept asking when I'd feel done. I don't think done exists in the way they mean it. There's only the next correct step, the next documented handoff, the next time my son laughs at something simple and reminds me why the fight was worth making exact. The last hearing on the calendar was routine, a compliance review before the judge who'd seen every turn. Rachel spoke briefly. The coordinator confirmed improvement and recommended keeping the current structure through the year. Andrea's side didn't object. The judge agreed and said he expected no further orders if we all kept doing what we were already doing. He told us to leave each other alone except for the app. That was fine with me. I walked out of the courthouse and called my brother. He asked how it went. I said it went like it should. He said he'd fire up the grill and asked if we wanted to stop by after nap time. I said we would. Revenge was never the point. Accountability was. The lock on my door held, but the line that mattered most was the one I kept drawing every day. No chaos in, no shortcuts, no bending the rules because it feels good in the moment. The work is quiet and repetitive and sometimes boring, but it keeps my son safe and it keeps me from becoming the thing I fought. That's the part no one tells you about the win. It looks like a calendar that runs on time, a folder with clean labels, and a door that opens only when it should. The last test didn't come in court.